podcast. Each episode of this 6 or maybe 8-part series will cover one of the films in the Alien saga. Today we're going to cover the first film in the series, Ridley Scott's Alien, the film that kicked the whole thing off. I'm Barish. I'm joined with my fellow host, James.
Hi, I'm James.
And here we go. So I'm going to start by giving a short recap of the film in the form of the synopsis, which is taken from Giger's Alien. There, it's a very old book which I've had on my shelf for quite a while. And this is the synopsis. Apparently, this is an outline of the first version of the story taken from Dan O'Bannon's notebook. Apparently,
Starbeast.
I don't know. I don't know how much of that I believe, but yeah, let's get through it. So, 7 astronauts, 2 women and 5 men, are in the spaceship Nostromo on a return flight to Earth. On the way, they come across a planet unknown to them and decide to make an unscheduled landing to explore. 3 members of the crew are chosen to make a reconnaissance. They soon find themselves in an enormous range of mountains. Suddenly, they catch sight of a huge derelict among the rocks, an unusual type of spaceship. They begin to explore it and come across a strangely equipped cockpit. In the center of the room, which is as big as a hangar, is a kind of pilot seat. I'm about a quarter of the way. And in it, the skeleton of some non-human creature. They draw the obvious conclusion that this was once the commander of the space vehicle and that he must have died some mysterious death, for there is a huge hole in his chest cavity. Like, this is already quite a lot of detail for a first draft.
It's not a first draft. We know.
I don't think it's a first draft. I think it's like a first draft of the synopsis after he's spent I don't know how long planning the thing. But but hang on, like, you've written books, so like, you know, when you write a synopsis of a book, once you've written the book, you
write the synopsis at the end. But we know that that's not a first draft because one of the interviews has, I believe, Ridley referring to Fox specifically but we know 2 things. One, that the characters were not cast for gender, yet that specifies 2 female.
2 women, and
exactly. And which means that was done after casting. And also we know that I believe Ridley himself in an interview said Fox changed it and asked for it to be 2 women. And that's from an interview at the time, 1979, 1980. And therefore this is after it's been picked up by the studio and after everything's been great. And the fact, did it refer to the Nostromo by name?
It did, yeah. So
in which case, again, we know that thing changed names a couple of times as well, I think. So they're being a bit cheeky. That's not a first
I think
draft.
So. I mean, like, I need to read the background of this, because immediately after the synopsis, it says, "Such is the outline of the first version of the story taken from from O'Bannon's notebook." But yeah, like we said, there's too much detail for it to be a first.
Yeah, that's
for it to be first draft. Okay, so, and you'll see even more, like, the astronauts, who can find no other living being nor any remains of one, leave the wreck. And a little later they come across a group of pyramids, half collapsed. In the hope of finding some clue to what they have just seen, they climb up the best preserved of the pyramids, for the entrance is apparently at the top. When they get to the top, the astronauts rig up a system of ropes so that one of them can go down and reconnoitre, which I later discovered means, like, explore, basically.
Go and have a look.
The inside of the pyramid. Yeah, and like, it's like all of this English and then this one French word in the middle of. Okay, to be fair, they had reconnaissance.
It's a loan word. It's a French loan word. Yeah. The English language is complicated.
Yeah,
it is the alien of languages.
Yeah. Since rather surprisingly the atmospheric conditions on the planet are the same as those on Earth, the astronaut who is venturing into the unknown decides to take off his helmet and leave it at the top. Taking no more than a torch and a radio, he slides down the rope. So, like, it's setting a lot. There's a lot of setup in.
It sounds like this is before Ridley came on, and it sounds like this is before a lot of the design happened, because obviously it's different to the film, but fundamentally it's more expensive because there's pyramids, but it's also it's also cheaper because he has a torch and a radio, and that's it, and a rope. No spacesuit mentioned. Takes off his helmet.
Yeah. Like if you have you read this before?
I haven't. I've seen that on. I saw that on the shelf in Forbidden Planet in about 1993. But I have a.
You should. I think you should read it because you're spot on. I think that there's I mean, this even goes on to detail like the changes as they were made, why they were made, kind of thing. And the pyramids.
I think what put me away from it, I think it was always being sold in a bundle with the Necronomicon, which is Giga's art book that predates Alien. And I like Giga's artwork, but Giga's another person I have a love-hate relationship with.
Yeah.
Like Ridley, it's complicated. I like the man's art exactly the same, actually. I like the man's art, but some of his ideologies, behaviors, some of those make me feel a bit. Ugh. But
I mean, that's
a post.
Yeah, I mean, like I just a slight tangent here. Being a Michael Jackson fan myself, I've learned exactly to dissociate the art and the artist.
I'd forgotten that you were a Michael Jackson fan. Yeah.
Huge, like musically hugely influential. So you can imagine.
Well, I think the thing for me, as you can see from when we've discussed this and made our notes for the podcast, the thing I mentioned, and this again, a few years ago, I bought a model kit of the Alien to make for my wife, the big Alien fan, and I started researching the original costume because I wanted to paint it up to make it look really good. And that's when I found out that there was a real skull in the Alien costume thing made by Giga, and that real skull was a very young, possibly very healthy person from India originally, and the whole ethics of getting your hands on a real skull, and then using that as an artist, I can see like, oh, it's edgy to use real human bits in art, but it's not edgy; it's just dickish. In the late 20th, early 21st century, there is no excuse for that. Leonardo had an excuse; he was working in the 15th century. We don't have that excuse. We don't need that, and I find that's one thing I find icky. That and all of his little pictures. Have you seen the pictures Giga took where he got the alien head, the prop? And they gave it to him after the thing, or I don't know, maybe he stole it, stuck it in a suitcase, ran off with it. And he's basically got a couple of blonde models in all kinds of sexy poses with the alien head. And it's like all of his little Polaroid snaps that he's taken and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're a bit weird, aren't you, mate?
Yeah, I mean, he's an artist. He's yeah.
Yeah, I just realised that. But
right, back to the synopsis. Where were we? Because I do think it's worth reading it. It's interesting. When they get to the blah 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 blah, recognize blah 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 blah. Helmet, leave it at the top. Okay, taking no more than a torch and a radio, he slides down the rope. Okay, here we go. Moist, warm vapors rise up all around him. At last, he reaches the floor of the pyramid. The light from his torch falls on unknown, mysterious shapes in the form of hieroglyphics on the walls. On the ground, he catches sight of some strange objects like spore capsules or eggs. He passes all this information up to his companions by radio as they wait for him at the entrance up above. Cautiously, he goes up to one of the capsules and gently touches it. At once, a lid springs open and a loathsome creature jumps out of the opening straight on into his face and forces a tube down the petrified man's throat. The long radio silence has made the watchers at the entrance anxious. After some time, when there is still no sign of life from below, they decide to haul their companion up again. As they pull him into the light, they see with horror what has happened to their still unconscious companion. So I'm nearly way over half. I'm about 3/5 of the way. Actually, more than 3/5 of the way. Maybe 3/4.
It's about 40 minutes into the film.
Yeah, exactly. They cannot prise the disgusting creature loose from his face, so there is nothing for it but to take them both back to the mothership, Nostromo. There he is taken at once to the operating theatre and x-rayed. The picture shows a tube-like proboscis reaching down inside him, ending at the top of his lungs. It has given a dark colour to the tissue. They try to cut the brute away with a scalpel. At the first incision, a yellow acid fluid spurts out and instantly eats through the table with a sizzling noise. At a loss, the crew withdraws to discuss what action they should take. When someone looks at the sick man again, the beast is lying on the floor, rolled up and lifeless. The astronaut has recovered consciousness but cannot remember anything and feels no pain at all. About 3 weeks later, as they are having dinner, the dreadful thing happens. The man who had been attacked by the animal doubles up in agony, strikes out all around him like a madman, and screams with pain, so that the terrified crew have to hold him down. Suddenly, his t-shirt is stained with blood, and a disgusting creature bursts out of his chest. A head smeared with blood and a squat body become visible. From its mouth, an opening filled with small, sharp teeth, there comes a cry. The beast breaks loose, squirming out of its imprisonment, and darts across the table like lightning. The crew, paralyzed with shock, slowly get back into action. Too late. Alien 2, the chestburster, has disappeared into the maze of passages in the Nostromo. Quickly, it goes up into Alien 3, spreading terror and death. That's the
Alien 3 certainly spread terror.
Alien 3 certainly did. Yeah, so yeah, already we've already, it's already provided fuel for conversation, which was kind of what I was hoping. Because it's interesting that, I mean, there's a lot of detail in the middle. Like, there's way too much detail in the middle for a synopsis.
Yeah, it really feels. I mean, I think things in the 90s when that book came out. I think that's from the 90s version because it's softback. I think we weren't as rigorous with where we got our. Ironically, the internet is not very rigorous either. But I think at that point there was a lot of editing was more prevalent. Like you could see that going across someone's desk, and that doesn't feel like a first. It doesn't match with any of the first drafts that I've heard about, apart from the pyramid stuff, which does. It's like someone got a first draft and thought, oh well, that's not really enough. Let's put a bit more in because otherwise it won't make a lot of sense. Or it's it's apocrypha. There's a sense of apocrypha to it. If you see
Cool.
what
So,
I mean.
I mean, by and large, it kind of it expands a lot on the alien. I mean, it basically reveals the alien life cycle, like in the synopsis. In that passage, it's you wouldn't put that in on the back of a book because it's like putting.
But that's a synopsis that's being sent out to people working on the film. It's a synopsis, not a synopsis, not a blurb, basically.
That's right. So it's apt really because I think that's how they kind of hooked Giga, I think. Right, so here we go. So I think let's go on to part 1, which is acts and scenes of note. So we've previously, like, obviously rewatched the film for this. We've watched it God knows how many times, probably individually, but and the idea was that we wanted to pick out certain scenes in the film and wanted to go into them in a bit more detail. Basically, like this is not if you haven't figured it out already, we're not going to really review the film. There's a lot of spoilers.
If you want to review the film, there's plenty out there. Go and read the original reviews. No, that's not something that someone's made since. Go and read a review from 1979 or 1980. Or
it's fascinating. We were watching some videos prior to this and watching videos of like reactions to the film, people taking their kids along to watch it. And
I took my 9-month-old in to see the film. He was okay when I handed him a beer and a cigarette.
It was a bit like that. And even hearing the film critics' reaction, talking about how they were disturbed and they found it really uncomfortable and all of this. It's like it's a horror film.
But
it's like a horror film.
But it's a horror film. But what got it made, what got it the funding, was hey, Star Wars made a lot of money. Close Encounters made a lot of money. Big sci-fi renaissance. Star Trek: The Motion Picture is coming out at exactly the same time. Sci-fi is the hot new thing. They're going into it going, hey, this looks cool. Let's go and watch the new Star Wars type film. And that's not Obi-Wan Kenobi there. That's
So
something else.
I'd like to segue into like my first scene from that, because that's a perfect like point. Like sci-fi was basically at the end of the 70s due to Star Wars. There was a whole bunch of films made on the back of it, science fiction films made on the back of it, and the intro to Star Wars rightly was copied in a lot of them. The kind of like a small ship kind of zooming into frame, and then a huge ginormous ship following it, shooting it, and immediately gives you a sense of perspective, gives you a sense. All of it, it's been covered again and again. But the intro to this film is also something that is iconic. The film is called Alien. It's about an alien, and that's what I want to talk about. Like the fact that you've got this slow pan across an alien planet. It's not Earth, recognizably,
with your classical music in the background.
Yeah, very mysterious music, kind of giving you a sense of there's something eerie, something unknown, and like the letters or parts of the letters kind of fading into view. It's another iconic, beautiful intro that kind of, it's hard to copy because you can't. The generic starship, flying into view, changed by another starship of another science fiction universe.
To be
but
fair,
you can't really...
it wasn't. I mean, Star Wars, when it did that, invented motion control photography. Basically, that was new. Been done to death since, as you say. Whereas I think Alien was a lot more. Alien was made in Britain, and the effects in Alien have got more in common with 2001: A Space Odyssey and James Bond and Thunderbirds. That's not. I don't know if they used a motion control rig in Alien at all. I don't know if they weren't doing similar to what we have years later in Red Dwarf. Alien's biggest spin-off is Red Dwarf, of course. That they're using physical models moving in physical space, and there's less. I don't think there's much motion control going on there. It's a landscape painting. I think Star Wars is a comic book, Star Wars is Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein's a good comparison for Star Wars. But whereas what we've got here is a pastoral landscape. Alien opens with a painting.
Yeah.
Probably quite literally a painting, I would suspect.
Yeah. So that's obviously the introduction to the whole film, and the film is split up more or less into 3 acts. Although, like the third act can be split into 2 itself, and I'm calling those acts. Act 1, the beacon, which is basically the introduction to the whole thing. You're kind of led in to explore the spaceship, the crew, and the introduction to the story that there's a beacon and they've got to go and explore. Act 2 is basically once the facehuggers attached itself to Kane, everything from that point on is Act 2, where there's an alien on board. They want to just get off the planet. They want to deal with the fact that their friend's got this thing on him, and the chestburster scene happens, and then it's everything up until they discover Ash is a robot. For me, because there's an alien on board. And to deal with
Act 2 is the hunt. They're going after it, and at the end of that act, let's not go after it. Let's run away from it instead. Running towards, running away.
And exactly, and Act 3 is the escape. Exactly. So, like, once they discover Ash is a robot, once they discover, look, we've lost a lot of lives, and there's a conspiracy behind everything as well. Let's just escape. Let's just get away from it all. And obviously, like, you can, everything after that can be Act 3, or you can also. What I did is I split the very, very final bit when Ripley's on the shuttle as 3.2, the finale. Basically.
Yeah, it's not really an epilogue, but it pretends to be an epilogue at first.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It kind of plays with the act structure.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's go. Yeah, we've done the intro. I think just the another kind of, it's not really a scene strictly speaking, but like the general kind of between the crew, you kind of set up like the way that they talk with each other. There's almost like a family at Christmas vibe.
My favorite part of the film is that part that's it's almost like a little documentary. I actually like all of that, probably because I'm more, seeing Alien as a child, it was, ooh, spaceships, and then alien stuff happens. That's the boring bit when you're about 4. But the spaceship stuff, that's the cool part. And that's still, even now.
It really is a really cool part of the film, because like there's that sense of exploration still, because science fiction is still fairly new to cinema goers, to film fans, and so there is this really like patient panning across the ship into the rooms of their lives, kind of the kitchen, the dining area, kind of the cockpit where they kind of control the craft. It's an exploration and discovery.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the kitchen there, because this was the new wave of science fiction in books and film. Obviously, we've had stuff in the 50s and what have you, and we later on see films from the 50s being remade, like The Thing, and so forth. But this new wave of science fiction is very new to audiences. And you mentioned the kitchen, and I think the first part of Alien, there's a phrase in dramatic writing, kitchen sink drama, and that's exactly what Alien is. These are mostly working class. No, they call it blue collar science fiction in critical places. They refer to Alien as blue collar science fiction because they're all working class, they're all oil rig people. They're not quite. We can see the divide in there, but it is kitchen sink. It's very, very real, and part of that is because of bringing on Ridley Scott as a director who does a lot visually to make something believable. That whole tour through the beginning of the ship, and the helmet just dropped on things and junk everywhere.
Yeah.
These days you leave a Starbucks cup in the background in Game of Thrones, and that's a cock up. But in those days you leave a coffee cup in the background of Aliens, that's set detail.
Yeah.
It's a very different
It's also
thing.
interesting now that you mentioned that. It got me thinking about Quentin Tarantino and Reservoir Dogs, and how his kitchen sink drama, like I never really thought of it in those terms before.
I always fall asleep in Reservoir Dogs, but that opening scene where they're discussing the tip is exactly that.
Yeah, it's exactly that, and that's what kind of propelled him to fame. I guess that was his break, wasn't it? Because like it was like a big deal that there was like just casual conversation. Normally dialogue is like plot driven, and you're moving something forward, and if you're not, then there's no point in the dialogue.
Get rid of it. Yeah. I don't believe in that. I'm a big fan of. Does this scene do anything for the plot? No. But does this scene do anything for the characters? Yes. Keep it in.
Yeah, exactly. That's what. Yeah.
And world building as well. You can't do world building without someone having a drink. It's
again, beautiful segue here, because the next point that I've kind of highlighted from Act 1 is the entire expedition, the landing party, the kind of exploration of the alien environment, and eventually the alien the egg chamber, and like that whole. I think of all of this, of all of the intro, of all of Act 1, or maybe of all of the whole film, the thing that always sticks with me, like the thing that has always left a lasting impression, is that exploration of the alien surface, because there is this, just as much as I'm really curious about the spaceship and the way that they interact, and like the way that it's just a big, huge character is there in the background that you're kind of able to explore, like Easter eggs. The alien surface is very much like that as well. It's lovingly crafted. It's mysterious. It's scary. It's violent. There's really stormy conditions and loud noise, and I just love the whole thing. And then they enter the silence. It's like, in contrast, the silence of the actual derelict craft, where it's just just things that are clearly of alien origin, and I just love the whole thing. It's really that's Ridley Scott, basically, and Giga, and two greats.
And having the good sense in Ridley's case of having, okay, you're going to do the alien stuff, you're going to do the spaceship stuff, and you're going to do the inside of the spaceship stuff, and you're going to do the costumes. And there's different people doing different things according to their talents. And he's not brought in, none of the people really weren't Los Angeles film people. The designers in particular weren't even they're not all from one place. I mean, Giga's Swiss, Chris Foss is from LA. There's all kinds of people involved, and of course, the craft people making it would have been the people who probably did work on 2001 Thunderbirds. And the Star Wars films, because it was all shot in Britain, and they've got some experience that they're bringing to it. But fundamentally, I think the exploration that you're talking about comes from, this was the 1970s. This was when Jacques Cousteau was off diving the depths and, exploring underneath the ocean. People were tuning in to watch David Attenborough do Life on Earth. I think that's more 80s, a bit later. But this is the era where we were getting documentaries, the most inhospitable places on Earth. You could get a camera there now. You could film there. So when you're seeing the alien, the surface of the planet of LV-426, I think is the number. I'm rubbish with numbers. Right. It's like watching a documentary. You're watching a bunch of people who, coincidentally, again, they match that group of people. If you watch a documentary of Jacques Cousteau or something, my father always made a joke that Jacques Cousteau was great because we are exploring the ocean. We have discovered this fish that no one has ever discovered before. So we captured it and ate it, because there was lots of shots of them sitting about on the ship, having their dinner, what have you. And that's what we've got in that opening of Alien. What you've got is like a kind of a kind of survey. It's like a documentary about these explorers. They're not really explorers, but it's a documentary style that we see, and you see it again later on in Carpenter's The Thing with the bearded fellows up in the North Pole. It's very real because we know what that looks like now. If you'd made it in the 60s, maybe we didn't know what that looked like. You could still lie to people on screen, but now we know what that looks like.
And then okay, so there's this other thing that there's this other aspect to this as well, which maybe will come back into some of the later kind of sections, but like the artwork of the alien craft and like the model, the alien creature itself, the eggs, the face hugger, this film made a star out of Giga, right? This film made him a world famous name, basically, like a global, well, I wouldn't say like household name, but like
he was known. They would use him to advertise other films that he worked on.
Yeah, it made his career, basically. I mean, he probably I mean, he was also working on Dune. I don't know how much.
He didn't do anything for the David Lynch Dune. He worked on Jodorowsky's Dune, which is like a legend in itself now. I'll be honest, I wasn't that excited. When I looked at it, I was like, on balance, I preferred that we got the David Lynch version, even though that has its problems. But everything he did for Dune, I think, pretty much is what ended up to a greater extent in Alien. The sad thing about Giger is he never escaped the shadow of Alien. I think his best known thing, apart from Alien, was when he did Species, which is Alien on Earth with a girl. It's what if there was a girl alien, basically. And I like the design work on Species. I actually quite like some of the story in Species. It became B-movie schlock after the second one, but hey, we've seen that happen before too.
We certainly have, which is why during the intro we're talking about 6, maybe 8-part podcast of the Alien saga. Because
it depends on how fast Ridley Scott gets the next one out as well, doesn't it? We could be doing these for years.
Well, yeah. Okay, so that's Act 1. I think that brings us into Act 2. So basically, the conclusion of Act 1 is that Kane, one of the crew, approaches one of these eggs and gets a face hugger on him, and now they're back at the ship and they're trying to get on board. So the chest burster scene, I mean, like before the chest burster scene, I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about. If there is, and we can
I think it's
the chest burster scene, but
I think a weird anecdotal thing about the egg and some stuff that's kind of come up in the chest burster scene is one of the reasons why the special effects on the egg look so good, though 4K isn't that kind to them, is you've got the sort of glass bottom or perspex bottom and the clay on top, but all that stuff inside, it looked very good, didn't it, in a the pre-CGI world, and that's basically because they went down the butcher's shop and got a load of tripe and lamb's bits and just stuck it in there. Looks
Stuck it in
great.
there, yeah.
I can't fault how it looks, but the thought of dealing with that must have, the look of revulsion on John Hurt's face is probably the smell. It's
Well, I was going to say, he's in a helmet. Like, I wonder how airtight that thing is for real. Like, he's not in a real space costume, of course. Yeah,
he's like, that's the, and it's wonderfully done. It's the cutting, the way it melts through the effects, beautiful, wonderful physical effects, and all the detailing and the replays on the helmet and stuff that we'll probably get to later in the final scenes. But all of that was real guts, and that comes back with a bit of a vengeance in the chestburster scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's very okay. So the chestburster scene, Kane after the facehugger's like fallen off, dropped off. He's before they go into hypersleep on the journey back home. They want to have one final meal, and then they're in the mess hall in the kitchen, basically eating, and there's this kitchen sink discussion again, and all of a sudden he starts coughing.
Yeah. Really bad. I mean, it's we could pretend to go film school. This is not serious criticism, but we've just had Easter, and what you've got there is the Last Supper, and then Cain came back. Except it wasn't Cain; it was Cain's child, as they call it rather dramatically. But no, it's interesting because
that could be a title for the podcast, Cain's Child.
Cain's Child. It's interesting because a lot was made at the time about that. The attack on Cain with the egg is very seen as symbolistic of basically rape. It's oral rape for Cain.
Yeah, it is.
It keys into a lot of
against his will,
big fears. And the facehugger itself is designed to look like female anatomy. There's no getting away from that either. Geiger said, "Hey, you know what would be cool?" Strange.
I mean, Geiger's involved, or Giger. His mind works in.
But I don't think it was just
ways.
I don't think it was just him designing the facehugger. I think someone else was involved. But it is basically it's vagina dentata, as the theory goes. So Cain has been impregnated. Essentially, Cain has been impregnated. And what that makes, and what I find interesting in the chestburster scene, is how much of that also looks like a giving birth scene. Everyone's like, oh no, we must hold him down, give him something to bite down on. All of that. You're expecting Ash to wander off and come back with a bowl of hot water and some towels. It's a labour scene. That's what it is. It's a giving birth scene, which Alien does a lot, obviously, later on. But this is the first.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I mean, we'll come back to this in the themes part later on. But there's definitely a lot of symbolism and kind of repetition of certain
fears and
themes. That's exactly what it's called. Yeah. But so then the chestburster scene. I can't remember I can't remember the details of it, but it feels so raw, partly because there was a certain amount of what was about to happen that was not disclosed to the whole crew. They came back in before the chest burster and the blood effects were kind of triggered. They all went off for a cigarette break, or they took a break of some sort. They came back in, and of course, John Hurt's there on the table, and
hi guys, how's it going?
And they know,
good fag break. Did John Hurt smoke? So did someone give him one? Did he have a cigarette? Someone whose job it was to hold a cigarette to his mouth while he's being sort of set into this table,
Well, yeah. To be fair, I can't remember if he must have had control of his arms. But anyway, the point is that they came in and you see that that after that very first blood kind of spurt, the look on everyone's faces is fantastic. It's real. It's visceral, in a very literal sense,
Very, very literal, because again, they'd gone, instead of being sensible and going down the shop and getting some corn syrup and food colouring or what have you, allegedly they'd used real blood, and some of it went into from the butcher shop, and some of it went into Veronica Cartwright's mouth. You see the shot where she's back, and she was sick for a few days. Is the legend? This may be apocryphal, but I have heard the story that due to that, films were banned from going down the butcher's shop anymore. Basically, it might be cheaper, but
Carried
it
before
made
or
people
after this?
sick. Yeah, exactly. I think it was before. It was before, and I know they still could. You could still do it on television because in 1989, Doctor Who did it with some bones, and they hadn't been cleaned properly, and it stank to high heaven when they were on location shooting, and that was like 10 years later. But I know that you're not really allowed to nip down the butcher's shop for your special effects anymore. It's got to be food safe gore.
Got to be kosher, but not literally kosher.
Yes, exactly.
Right,
You can imagine that today.
Really...
I want to be a film star, but I'm vegan. Is this halal?
Yeah, is this halal blood effect? Oh, chest burster scene. Let's move on to
Poor Veronica
Ash.
Ash.
Yeah, so I've got the Ash is a robot as the next thing, but do we want to talk about anything else in between Chestburster and Ash is a robot? Like, yep.
I think there's a segue there, really.
Your audio just cut out. Say again. There's a segue there.
There's a segue there because Ash is trying to help Kane. Ash is like the one giving him something to bite down on. Admittedly, like I say, he looks like he's being a busy little midwife. But at the same time, he's also the one that says, "Don't touch it," to the alien. And it goes either way. Yeah, it can go either way. Is it don't touch it because he doesn't want the alien to get hurt, or is it don't touch it because it looks like it'll have your arm off?
Yeah. Or maybe it's one of those things because later on we discover that Ash, was given a secret directive to kind of apprehend or to return a specimen of the alien.
So he should have grabbed it, really. Ash should have...
Yeah, but my question is then, I always wondered because of the way that... did he know that he had acid for blood?
No.
Did he?
That's all him doing is Mr. Spock stuff. When they're trying to cut the face hugger, it's like, oh, it's a silicon-based life form. It's the Horta from Star Trek. It's Turnabout Intruder. Oh my God, that's got miners and eggs. Yeah. Not Turnabout Intruder. Devil in the Dark. The one where Spock mind melds with the Horta and it's laying its eggs and they're worried about the eggs and there's miners. And that's a silicon-based life form as well. So that's Ash discovering all of that. That's Ash doing his Star Trek bit.
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, he didn't know that he discovered that it has acid for blood when they try to to cut the legs off the facehugger. So then maybe that is also a reason why he said don't touch it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because he looks like he was going to stab it. If he stabs it with some fork, acid gets on the...
He's not quite sure it's going to eat his arm off. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah. So anyway, so there's previously, before they let Kane back on the ship, there's that friction between Ripley and Ash because Ripley's trying to follow orders, trying to there's protocol for what you do when there's some kind of foreign object. There's a quarantine procedure, and then they should stay in quarantine, and she's refusing to let Dallas, Kane, and Lambert back on the ship.
Ash, being a science officer, he's being human. Oh no, Kane's in trouble. We've got to let them in and help. We've got to let and Ripley's the one being cold and android-like. It's all
exactly.
It's a fake out.
It is, and then she confronts him about it, and he gives a whole science officer defense, and
it's not even a science officer defense; it's a human defense. Oh well, I know. I thought we should help him.
Couldn't just let him.
Yeah.
What was it? I think we talked about it last time. You made a really good point about how basically Ash, up until that point, is picked on and almost bullied by the rest of the crew. He's not given any respect.
He's the new boy. Get out of my chair, dusting down the chair afterwards. He's always stood apart. He always moves. He doesn't feel...
And he's a bit slighter as well. He's a bit smaller than the rest of them. gets like overwhelmed by the physicality of
And
Parker.
fundamentally, of course, he's a villain because he speaks with a British accent.
Yeah, it's an American film, of course.
Apart from John Hurt. John Hurt isn't a villain, but he's the one who kicks off all the trouble. So
villain or victim?
Yeah, exactly. It's that's the question. Kane gets them into trouble. Kane's like, oh, let's go to the planet and all that business, like we talked about before. So it's all Kane and Ash's fault, really. That's the thing.
Yeah. So you got examples of Ash basically being human, treated, bullied as a human, and what's the word? Like letting Kane on board so that he can treat him.
And he's been ordered to do that by Dallas as well. So it's not like he's on his own in this. Dallas doesn't bully. Dallas is always quite kind,
fair to him. Yeah. So then, at that point, with that, sorry, up until this point, we've had two deaths. Brett's been taken away. We assume he's dead.
Yep.
Dallas is same. We assume that he's dead as well. And now that leaves Ripley in charge, and so she now has access to the ship's computer, and she confronts it and starts putting pressure on, trying to find out what their chances are, what they should do to survive.
I'm going to go and get my own. She goes to get her own answers. She does her own research, which goes back again to the modern era. I'm going to go and do my own research now about vaccines.
Well, she almost sees it as a threat to Ash, and of course, so she finds out. She finds out from Mother that there was a kind of a directive, basically, to retrieve the specimen.
Crew expendable
at all costs, basically, and that's when Ash, creeping into the Mother room, like there's a explanation for all of this,
It is, and it's that line. I think it all hangs on that one line. There's a part of me that wants to know what his explanation was. In another universe, Ash turns around and says, "Well, they told me you were extendable, but of course I don't believe that at all. The hell with my orders."
Yeah, my orders are my orders. I'm a robot. I can't disobey them. But
I'm looking for loopholes. Help me find a way to help you because I don't really want them. And that would have been interesting. But instead, the very next thing, Ripley hits him, shonks him one.
Yeah,
gives him a head injury. We see him bleeding.
And is that and that's the thing, that a fascinating point which I never really considered, because why does he basically like completely go berserk at that point? Is it because like Ripley went, because he's now conflicted? Is it because Ripley's like whacked him one and dodged, like hit a circuit?
I mean, he's clearly physically damaged. You see the eye twitching, the milk blood coming down. Yeah. And if his original intent when he walked into that room was to kill Ripley, we've already seen that he appeared like a ninja. Suddenly next to her. He could have just broken her neck from behind or what have you.
If he wanted to,
Yeah, but everything that follows is like a condensed story where he's been bullied. He's not human, so he doesn't have human, this is the time where the human emotions mess up androids. That's what they do. That's a big thing in sci-fi in this period. And he gets hit on the head. And everything after that is this weird kind of almost improvised psychosexual thing. Is Ash a Ken doll? Is he trying to be human but can't handle being human? And that's why he suddenly lashes out. Because prior to this, he's been kind of helpful but a bit weird. He invents the motion tracker and what have you, but it doesn't always work. And
And I think like a lot of film goers of our generation, certainly today, complain that there's way too much information, way too much background, way too much kind of like trying to normalize or humanize villains and so on. And what I love about this film is the fact that he's a robot is just incidental. There's so many questions that comes out of that reveal, but you never get to know that, and that's maybe one of the reasons why it's endured as a film.
Like yourself, I'm very big on the idea that we shouldn't be going around trying to rehabilitate our villains and see it from their point of view, because in some cases where it's a black and white morality tale, doing that muddies the waters, ruins the story, and in terms of films for a younger audience, instead, it's taking away one of the functions that stories traditionally have always fulfilled. However, in terms of is Ash a goodie, or was Ash a goodie who just got pushed too far and broken, I think is interesting when you consider that the very next film, I think the very next film that Ridley works on, he was supposed to do Dune, but I think he had a family member die, and he goes on to Blade Runner. And if you watch Blade Runner, which is very related to Alien and the Aliens universe as it goes on, if you watch Blade Runner, the interesting point that comes at the end of that film is that film in the text is all about humanizing its villain or villainizing its human, arguably. But it's Rutger Hauer at the end of Blade Runner. Yes, he is a baddie. Yes, he has killed people. But you kind of see it, and he's an artificial life form. In many ways, Rutger Hauer is and Roy Batty in Blade Runner is almost a sequel to Ash, which is really funny because I know you've not listened to the audio or read the sequel to Alien, the Beyond the Shadows business. Rutger Hauer plays the role of Ash, which is extra foldy. And I think Ash is one of those early examples of an android, and it's not that early. Star Trek was doing it in 1966, What a Little Girl's Made of. Ash is an interesting, if you come to Ash as a science fiction person with the knowledge of androids and human emotions messing up androids, and if you look at it through what I might call a science fiction fan lens, Ash becomes a much more interesting character, because right up until the moment he was thumped and went wrong, he might have been on their side. Then he goes scatty, tries to kill Ripley, and that scene with the magazine down her throat is so clumsy. You're looking at it now in glorious 4K, and it doesn't, you can see Sigourney holding on to the magazine, and it's like, it doesn't look as shocking as you think. It just looks a little clumsy. And then after that, he's all
I don't know.
friendly.
I said this last time as well. Like basically, like it does look clumsy, but the clumsiness adds to almost like the psychoticness of it.
It does.
Fear almost like he's clearly not in his right mind, and so what even that, like, what's he gonna do next? I know what he's gonna do next, but it's, I don't know,
it's really strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the unhumanness of it.
Yeah, but it's both human and inhuman at the same time, and it's like he's expressing, again, it's that subtext. He's expressing sexual frustration because, he's a robot that maybe doesn't have the parts. Maybe he fancies Ripley. What's he doing with the magazine? It's a phallic imagery. And he gets knocked about. And I think the really weird thing is at the end, obviously, when he gets his head lonked off and he's on the table, covered in the waxy milk stuff, and the design on the design on the android is really good. Actually, it's really ahead of its time.
Really, really good.
It's just marbles, and again, they've been down the butcher's shop for some tripe and bleached it and thrown that in there and some milk, and it really works. But I think that little smile he does at the end when he says, "Oh, you do have my sympathies" and all that, and you're never quite sure if that is okay. Maybe Ash was a goodie, or he's just being a smug git. And given that it's Parker that he's talking to who did bully him and is the one that's just logged his head off, there's that smug little... You do wonder if that's Ash going, yeah, well, maybe if you hadn't been so mean to me, I'd have still been around to help you, but good luck, It wouldn't have come after me. I'm an android,
Yeah, I thought, Ash... If you remove Ash from this whole film, it's a completely different film. Really,
I think it's not as oppressive, and there's no conspiracy without Ash.
Yeah, and the fear factor goes up several levels at this point in the film. That's when Ripley, who's newly in charge, freaked out by the fact that there's a corporate directive to basically bring this specimen back at the cost of their lives, and now she's discovered that there's a robot there as well, sent to kind of spy or like to ensure that this happens. That's when she's like, okay, it goes back to the previously, discarded plan to destroy the ship.
It jumps.
It goes up a notch.
It's what makes it. What was in that from the point of view of 1979? What was in that transmission? Who heard it to send them there? rather than just them picking it up, which is what we've been lied to about. They've been lied to about. And how much was known before they went there. It's basically it's the loophole upon which Ridley Scott got Covenant and Prometheus.
So we're now. I mean, like, yeah, because that goes back to what I said before. Like, there's so many unknowns in this film. It used to be a lot more that stories would just end with lots of unknowns, and stories would be left.
Or they would begin with unknowns. I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars and the big sci-fi boom. Oh, your father was he was in the Clone Wars. I thought with your father in the Clone Wars. What are the Clone Wars? I don't know. You've got to get everything contextually from that line, and it works. You don't need to know what the Clone Wars are for the story.
Yeah, you just need to know that they had the history.
Yeah, and you don't need to know what the company knows or how they know it. You just need to
know that the company want this back.
Yes, and it's a company.
Yeah. So we're now squarely in Act 3, which is the escape, kind of like the final act. And the one scene that there are probably more that we could discuss actually, but let's just go through it. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about is the Lambert and Parker death. So in the story, after Ash, I already mentioned that they plan to basically blow up the ship and take their chances on the escape shuttle. The Narcissus. And so what they're doing is that they're loading up, what is it, anti-coolant?
They need coolant for the ship. I don't know if they need it for that. Maybe they plan on making the whole ship into a suspended animation thing, or if they need it for oxygen or what have you. But they need it. Basically,
so they split up. Ripley's doing some. I know she's looking for Spot. She I can't remember what her.
That was a brilliant slip there. Did you notice that? You just said Ripley was looking for Spot.
But
all these.
Oh my god!
All these ginger cats look alike. This is Spot.
Why do all science fiction films or series have ginger cats? Spot is, of course, Data's cat in Star Trek: The Next
You
Generation.
must tell him that he is a good cat and a beautiful cat.
God, I did. Yeah, because the cat doesn't. The cat does have a name. It's
Jones.
Jones. Yeah. Oh my goodness me. God, doesn't happen to me often. But yeah, there we go. Yeah. So anyway, but she they split up because Parker and Lambert go off looking, stocking up on coolant. But what does she go off to do? I mean, it can't just be I'm going to go and get.
No, she was prepping. She wasn't going to get Jones. That occurred to her afterwards. Her job was to prep the shuttle.
She
had to turn everything on, make sure that the radio was tuned in, the
agnostics or something.
Parker didn't want none of that classic FM shit. She had to make sure it was tuned in to the correct radio station. Bit of disco. It's the 70s.
So they're off, and what happens at that point is the alien comes and corners Lambert.
Yes,
and Parker sees them and. He's got a flamethrower, but he can't shoot or he can't flame the alien because they're in a kind of an alcove together, and he would also kill Lambert.
Yeah.
And so he's demanding that she gets out of the way, and she's just frozen from fright and Ripley's listening to this on the radio, and she's screaming, and of course they can't hear.
And we know it's bad because whenever the alien appears, the soundtrack, which is wonderful, also has the unfortunate side effect of sounding a little bit like the alien has got terrible flatulence, because every time it appears, you get that little.
I mean, for the time. I really, really do like the sound effects of this film. Obviously, today it's easy to figure out what kind of processing and what kind of bad processing they did to get those sounds, but they work.
Are we talking about the sort of soundscape and the sound effects?
Just the effects.
The Foley and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll come back. I guess we'll come back to that in the themes. But yeah, so and this is the theme. This is the scene where. Okay, so lots of things. Last time we had a conversation about this, you revealed a lot of things that I never really noticed before. Like, for example, the fact that there are scenes. Well, Lambert's shoes are one color, and
they're not even. They're completely different shoes. They go halfway. There's, I think it's in the novelization from 1979. Has, I think it's a behind the scenes picture of Lambert, and they're cowboy boots. She wears big. She is written in the script as the fanciable one. You get all that silly bit earlier on with Parker and his light sexual harassment. Oh, I know what I fancy. So it's she's supposed to be the pin-up girl, and all of a sudden she's got a man's legs. Brett's specifically.
Yeah, that's right, Brett's legs. So I never noticed it before, but there are scenes, or there were you mentioned that there are alternative scenes for Brett's death, and they were just cut across, and Ridley Scott just made use of them in this death scene instead.
Yeah. It happens a lot with him. It does happen a lot. It's a good skill to have. I mean, he's a very he's almost still an indie filmmaker at this point, and that is don't waste anything. It's on the cutting room floor, but can we use it somewhere else?
And the other thing is, this is where the alien he takes his time with Lambert. With the others, he basically sticks his inner jaws into their skulls or whatever. He just gets rid of them basically, and with her,
except with Brett, he carries him off, and as we know, because of this little bit of edit as originally shot, Brett was a lot more. It was supposed to be like a cat playing with a mouse, with a little added dose of psychosexual drama going on.
Yeah, and then there's the whole tail thing, like the another connotation of rape. The fact that the alien reaches its tail up and across and between Lambert's legs, and then you don't see anything, but you hear lots of screaming and
huffing and puffing.
And at that point, what you're seeing is Ripley running to help, but of course she's too late.
And it's interesting because that bit, again, we were talking before this started about our memories of when we were in school together, and teenage boys can have some very odd fascinations when talking about films. And this bit with Lambert was one of those fascinations for some people in the class. But what was truly weird was a bunch of guys, I can't remember their names, but they were very much they were convinced that a similar scene happened in Alien 3 with one of the male prisoners. They would be going on about it like it was this salacious piece of gossip or something. Very weird. And allegedly this happened. I've seen Alien 3 since. I've seen Alien 3's assembly cut since. I don't remember anything there. So it's possible this was entirely a construct. But it does seem to be something that hits some people's psyches a lot harder than it hits others, and with different results, I would say.
Yeah, with different projections.
Yes.
So we have Lambert and Parker's death, and at this point, Ripley's alone in the ship, and she immediately runs to set off the self-destruct.
This is a big scene, I think. I think it's an important symbological scene.
You want to expand on that?
Well, there's two things. I mean, firstly, it's shot like an art film. There's a lot of Ripley, with her neck and all slow. It's all gone very, art house in its direction, and it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. The last time we spoke, we were trying to work out, was she stopped getting to the shuttle? Was she looking for Jones? Was she not looking? She found Jones by accident. But the most important thing for me, I think, is that the ship's computer is called Mother, has the immortal line, "Mother, you bitch." And of course, going back to earlier on when she went to get her own answers, even her own mother has turned upon her. The crew, their family, as it were, even their mother has gone, "I've had enough." It's almost religious. It's instead of father, it's mother. Father comes later in Alien, obviously, as a computer, but Mother has decided that the crew is expendable in much the same. It's almost biblical. It's like Noah and his ark. The mother has decided you're expendable. We want this other thing, this perfect organism. And for a moment in these scenes here, the mother thing, she's going to blow the ship up. The ship decides it doesn't. what it's gonna ignore her when it comes to turn. It's the most convoluted turning off of a bomb ever. Setting it up should be difficult. Turning it off shouldn't be quite so difficult.
Yeah.
And it's a magnificent piece of design and stuff. And you see it reflected later again. Star Trek II, the Genesis device is practically the same. I don't know what it was in that period, but hey, let's have pokey out cylinders that have got to be pushed down, really complicated. And it made sense on Mother that was like charges for mining almost, that she's turning off the coolant on the Nostromo, so the engines are going to overheat and go bang. That's, I think, what's happening. They give it just enough sciencey couching to suggest, right, we're going to turn the cooling off, so the engines are going to overheat, and it's a refinery, so it's basically like a small Boeing 747 exploding next to an oil refinery. That's what's happening. And then she can't turn it off, and that whole line of "Mother, you bitch," which of course comes back. It comes back in Aliens. Stay away from her, you bitch. And Ripley's the mother now. So the mother is a bit crap in this film. Someone's got mummy issues.
There's lots of mother as a theme in the next film, but we'll get to that as well. So she starts the self-destruct sequence. She runs to get to the shuttle. The alien is in the way, and so she just basically like drops Jones, who she's been carrying in a pet, sack, basically.
Most unbelievable thing in the film. Absolutely the most. Have you ever tried to get a cat in a pet carrier? That should have been 20 minutes of the film right there. Ripley should have been bleeding, the whole lot. They do not like being put in boxes. That was unrealistic.
Fair enough. And so she drops the pet carrier and she runs back because now the alien is between her and the ship, and this is where I was thinking, is this a bit where there's like a fake out, because like the alien is left alone with Jones, and you even see a real close up of the alien kind of like getting right into Jones's face, and you're like, oh, has he done something to the cat? Anyway, she runs back, tries to disarm the self-destruct. She can't. That's when she has a little flip out at Mother. She runs back now with nothing left to do except for just confront the alien, or just make it into the shuttle. And she gets back. There's no alien in sight. She grabs Jones, runs into the Narcissus, detaches and just flies the hell out of there while the Nostromo proceeds to blow up behind her. That's the end of Act 3, or, well, we're still in Act 3, but this is now...
It's another one of those bad decisions, though, because Ash has given her a motion detector. Admittedly, she decided it was a bit crap earlier on. Yeah. But you wouldn't you? Before you strip down to your underpants to go to bed, before you start brushing your teeth, you're going to...
I don't know.
Do a quick scan.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like if we're talking about bad decisions as a theme in this movie, like the fact is that,
to be fair, all of the bad decisions they made were at least decisions, and they didn't look bad at the point they were making them. They went wrong later. It's not like we get later on in alien films where people will just make bad decisions because.
Exactly. I'm going to make a defense of the bad decisions argument later on.
In Alien, I think it's more important that there are decisions being shown to be made. They're not necessarily bad decisions, but they're decisions that, in retrospect, are bad, as opposed to decisions that
agreed.
Just bad.
Fully agreed.
Other films, particularly slasher films, of which Alien is kind of a genre, will have people just make bad decisions because that's what the story needs. Whereas in Alien, they always make a point of showing you, here are two choices, here's why we think this one is the best.
All right, so here we are. Look, Act 3.2. She's on the Narcissus. She's apparently escaped the alien, but of course, right? She's preparing herself for hypersleep, and she's stripping down. So this is one of the scenes that you wanted to talk about. So you want to go into it?
Well, I think we talked about it before, how James Cameron doesn't like this scene, and how Sigourney Weaver almost thought they should have done the scene nude, which is interesting. But I think really it's a circular narrative, because she's getting ready to go to bed. And a lot of readings of Alien do talk at great length about, did we really need to see Sigourney Weaver in her pants? And is it just a sign of the times? Is it kind of sexism? I think, well, we've already seen John Hurt in his pants right at the opening of the film. So it's established. And if you go, oh, well, that's just an excuse to see nude people. Well, no, it's thematic, because the beginning of the film, the characters were being born. We've got the first birth scene is when the characters, the 7 sleepers, come out of hypersleep, and that's very much a birth scene. The room is white. It's beautiful. It's very calm and serene and womb-like, because it's not quite white. It's off-white, cream and padded and comfortable. And they wander around in their pants. That's what they do. To be fair, astronauts probably would, to a certain extent, when they get out of their spacesuits. You can actually see a cooling suit from what would be a space shuttle, very similar to that, hanging up next to Ripley. When she's stripping, you can see a cooling suit which has all of the tubes, and it's underwear for spacesuits, basically. You can see that hanging there, and I think audiences would have been aware of that at the time, because the space program and the shuttle was very in the forefront of people's minds. But do we need that? Yes, because it brings us full circle to the beginning of the film, and we think the film is finishing. We've just had the 2001 tribute slit scan explosion that goes on for far too long with the Nostromo. But that was almost expected in 1979. About 90% of Star Trek: The Motion Picture is lots of slit scan special effects. Again, my father always argued that scene and the scene of the Nostromo and the ones in the motion, they're all there for the hippies who are busy smoking stuff, and they really enjoy a bit of a light show. That's what
I wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Not at all. But yeah, she's vulnerable. At that point, she's making herself completely vulnerable. And you've got 3 animals there. You've got the alien is an animal, Jonesy is an animal, and we're being shown, here is Ripley. As Sigourney Weaver put it, we've seen the alien in its birthday suit. I should be in my birthday suit. They're vulnerable. There was discussion that apparently the alien wanted to mate with Ripley, but that's a very weird... apparently we were supposed to be seeing things from the alien's point of view.
Was that a discussion, or was that like fan theory?
No, it was in an interview. It was in an interview, and I think it was either Sigourney or Ridley. And depending on which one it was, depends on how I would think about it, I think. But I think it might even have been both of them. But I think it's very true. I think thematically, she's vulnerable at that point, and we're supposed to see her letting her guard down, and there's no better visual way of doing that, is there? I've seen really stupid horror films. There was a really stupid horror film in the early 2000s where there's a killer in the house, and this guy's wandering around with an axe, and he's like, I know there's a killer in the house. And he puts the axe down and sits down to play some PlayStation, and is then killed. And it's like, why did you put the axe down and play PlayStation? I mean,
bad decision.
Yeah, it's a bad decision, and it makes no sense. Whereas in Alien, it makes sense. She thinks she's left the alien on the ship. She thinks the killer is dead.
Yeah, she's completely at ease. She really believes she's escaped it, and she's now got this journey home.
And she, as Sigourney again said, and it's absolutely true, she's not going to want to stay in that uniform. It's covered in sweat and blood and God knows what else.
She's alone.
You're not going to.
She's completely alone. She has no reason. We're both married men. We know what like. Male or female, man, it's just so nice to, when you're completely alone, to just like strip down into the bare minimums, and
especially if it's a hot day. We've established the Narcissus is quite a warm environment, because they're going to get tanks.
That much coolant they need. Jesus. Lambert lost her life so that Ripley could be naked. Damn it, or half naked.
Yeah, it's and the attention to detail, again, something I can never fault Ridley for, and why I do like his films. Like I said, I think I mentioned it before, apparently it has the Weyland-Yutani logo stenciled on the knickers, in which case no wonder he's trying to get a shot of that. You've had the art department do that.
Right, on to basically the final of the scenes, which is actually this is all part of the same scene, because what happens is she strips down into underwear, and her plan is to blow not blow, but just like open the door and
suck the alien
release
out.
All of the oxygen and suck the alien out, basically. And so she's sitting there, she's in her space suit, and she's singing to herself to calm her down, "You are my lucky star," which I think it's from Singing in the Rain. And we were talking about this yesterday, and we just, my preferred fan theory, which I just made up yesterday, is
no, you didn't make it up yesterday. This has taken years of research. You've cross-referenced
the forum commentary,
yeah.
and
you've used all the different lenses, the Marxist lens, the feminist theory lens. Every film school thing ever went into this theory, we promise.
But basically, just a quick recap. Basically, Singing in the Rain. I'm not going to go into the whole story of that thing. So basically, Singing in the Rain. There's a singer who is an actress, and they just started doing talking films. So like previously, it was all silent, but she's got a horrible voice, so they get another singer to kind of sing her songs for her. And singer A, the famous actress, is kind of like, gets all of the care and attention, but the other one is kind of...
Her name is Lena, which is almost an anagram of alien.
It almost, very close. And so the point is that, so she's singing Lucky Lucky Star. She is singing it. And what you have is, you have the two remaining characters of the film in one shuttle, and one of them can survive. You can't have both of them. And Alien is vying to be the star, and Ripley's vying to be the star. She's singing the alien's lines, as it were. Anyway, and she prevails. Basically, that's kind of
the real hero is revealed.
My PhD thesis of a fan theory, which I've been working at for more than 3 years.
Yeah. Did we do you did a shot-for-shot analysis on the alien coming out from behind the pipes, and the singer being revealed?
Raindrops.
Yes, and the curtain being revealed by the person singing in the background. It's of course.
Yeah. Of course. So we've gone through the themes of note. I really like this format, I've got to say. We're on to part two. I don't know if... part two is basically themes. And we already covered a lot of themes that we, while going through the scenes. But I think that there are some things that are worth mentioning, maybe in quick fire succession. Or, for me, we've been at it for 2 hours.
Yeah, we should consider maybe coming back to the themes next week or something.
Yeah, the themes and the performances of individual, because I think it's fair to say that this has been a much greater success than the first attempt.
We bounced around